All right, y'all. Now it's time to get started with web scraping and data miner. But before we open up the program, I want to explain a little bit about the formatting from taking data from the internet and putting it into a spreadsheet. So if we look at this example from Lund University's page, you'll see that there are 4 elements, these chunks of a website that repeat over and over. Each one of these is going to be a row in the data. So every row in the spreadsheet is going to correspond to one of these elements. And then the information within each element is going to be a column. So if we look at the first example, column 1 is the URL or the link to the image. Because we can't just put an image into a spreadsheet, we can only put the link to the image in the spreadsheet. So that's going to be column 1. What I've called headline or title, that's going to be column 2. And then content or description is going to be column 3. So the point here is to show that each element is going to be its own row, and then across all of the elements, they're going to share columns, which is the information that they share. The image URL, the headline, and the content in this case. So it takes a little bit of formatting your brain to figure out the rows and the columns, but it's quite easy once you get it. So let's look at another example from our European Parliament politicians. Here we have our element, and then we have individual pieces of information that we want to extract from the website. For example, the politician's name, their group in the European Parliament, the country they come from, and then their national political party. So I've just typed this out, I didn't scrape it, just to give you another example of rows versus columns. So in this case, each politician as an element would have their own row. And then these 4 pieces of information, the politician's name, group, country, and national party, are all going to be columns. So we can see that Magdalena, who's over here, she is row 2, Asim is row 3, Isabella is row 4, and they all share this information that gets put into the spreadsheet. So that's the basic logic of what we can do. We can try to find the elements, find the pieces of information that these elements share, and put them into a spreadsheet where the rows are the elements and the columns are the individual pieces of information that all of the elements share. So that's what we're going to do with Data Miner. And without further ado, let's open Data Miner up. And the way we do that is by going to Google Chrome. And one way to access the tool is just to go to the website, dataminer.io. And then you have Add to Chrome. It's really easy. Or you can go to the Chrome Extensions tab, Manage Extensions tab, and search for, I think it actually might be Data Scraper. I don't know what's going on. It's Data Miner, but also Data Scraper. So perhaps it's easiest just to go to dataminer.io and click Add to Chrome and install the extension. It's super easy, and once you do it, it will be in your Chrome Extensions tab. So once you open up Data Miner, and I think I'm logged in, so you won't see this immediately. Let me log out. And try again. So you'll probably get something like this, and then you'll need to log in. You sign in with a Google account. So just follow the steps. You'll probably have to do some type of authorization with your email or your phone number. I've already done that developing this course. So take a moment, pause the video, get Data Miner installed, log in with your Google account, and you should get to a page that looks something like this. Now there's a couple of very important things to point out before we start using the tool. The first is that you start off the free plan you're allowed to scrape 500 pages every month, and that will reset after 1 month. So the important point here is to not go so crazy at the beginning with web scraping that you use your 500 page limit and then don't have any pages left over for the exam. So you'll see in Dataminr, we can choose how many pages to scrape at one time. When you're starting out, just do 1 or 2. When you're trying pagination, going from one page to another, maybe just try 3 so that you conserve your plan. 500 pages is quite a lot, but if you just let it rip on something, you can run out pretty quickly depending on how much data you're trying to scrape. So that's one important thing. Look out for the number of pages that you've scraped in a month, and you can see that Dataminr keeps a tab so you can see where your limit is. Now, you can increase that number by purchasing additional plans, and you'll see that there are different plans that allow you to scrape more or less per month, but we should all be able to do it within the free version. Okay, so that's just the basic getting started with Dataminr. Now, how do we actually use it? So the first thing we need to do is go to an actual website, and let's go to our bookstoscrape.com. Again, because this is a sandbox testing site where we won't have any problem scraping. It's developed to try web scraping, so we won't have to worry about being perceived as a hacker or asking for permission or anything like that. So if we look at Books to Scrape, it's always a good idea to just get a sense of what's going on with your web page. So here we can see that we have some elements, and there is 4 books. And how many rows? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have 4 books, 5 rows. We have 20 books on the page. Now, to get started with scraping, what we're going to do is while we're on the page, we're going to open up Dataminr. And what Dataminr, the way it works is it calls them recipes for whatever reason. We need to develop a recipe where we're going to pull out or tell Dataminr where to pull out parts of the code that we want. So the first thing you want to do is make our own recipe for this page. And it won't let me do this in full screen. So make your own recipe for this page. Now, we're going to work through these tabs. Not all of them are important for us. But you'll see that Dataminr in these different tabs includes little instructional videos that you can also watch that explains how to use the tool. So I think there's also some tutorials on YouTube. Google around if you get stuck, and you will get stuck because each website is different, and you may have to go a little bit more into the customized tools that we're not going to use here because it's impossible for me to predict what you want to scrape. So I'm going to give you an introduction into the basic use of the tools and show you how to go about finding the information that you want to put into your spreadsheet. So the first thing that we want to do is we have to tell Dataminr, are we scraping a list page or a details page? Now remember, a list page is essentially a page with a lot of different elements on it. This is what we've been looking at. There's a list of elements on this page. And then if we clicked an item in the list, that would bring us to a details page. So what we're going to do by the end of this course is we're going to scrape the list, and then what you can tell Dataminr to do is for every item in the list, for every details page in that list, scrape that too. Now, to do that at a larger scale, to take a huge list and connect it to the details page and scrape the list, then all the details, you're going to have to upgrade your plan. but I'll at least show you how to do it, and then you can decide whether putting a little bit of extra money to upgrade the plan is what you need for your project. But the basic idea is you build a scraper for the list, and you build a scraper for the details, and then you can combine the two to scrape the list and all the details. But again, that's a little bit more advanced. I'll show you how to do all the components of that, and then you can decide whether you want to put them together and upgrade your plan. But for now, let's just stick first with the list. And I'm going to warn you a little bit in advance that there's going to be some examples here that are difficult to follow the first time you see them. But I want to give you an overview of things that can go wrong first, so that when we move to another tutorial, you'll see what the process of troubleshooting looks like. Because in some cases, you'll get the information you want just like that. In other cases, you're going to have to kind of dig around in the code and figure out what's going on, which is why I want to show you how to use that CSS selector and learn a little bit about HTML. Okay, so this is the list page. This is what we want to scrape. Now we can skip this and go straight to scrape. So the first thing we need to do is we need to define our rows. Remember, those are going to be the elements, the big chunks that we want to scrape. What is kind of the box that contains our information? And luckily, Dataminr has an easy row finder where once we activate it, you'll see that it works very much like a CSS selector. And in fact, that's exactly what Dataminr is doing. So just to show you, if we go to Developer Tools, you'll see that you have to open up a little more. You'll see that as I'm moving around, well, I have to open it up more to show you that as I am interacting with the code, we'll see a better example later. Dataminr is finding, here we go. So we can see as I highlight across different parts of the web page, Dataminr is showing where in the code that box is corresponding to. So there is a connection with the backend website, is what I want to say. But for the purpose here, we just want to basically draw a box around the element that we want. And Dataminr makes it quite easy to do that, where we can say, okay, here's our element. That's our first row we want. We press 1. And then we press 2. And if Dataminr picks it up, we'll get all of these with boxes. But here, it's not detecting a pattern. And so we can't actually go forward. Remember I told you that web scraping is going to be frustrating. I couldn't figure this out because here I am, I'm selecting elements, it's not working. But there is actually a smaller box that is giving us our element that we want. So the one I selected was too broad. And there's almost no way to know this without going back and forth and just playing around trying to find the rows that Dataminr will pick up. So I was already a little frustrated figuring out why won't this work? And you'll have that feeling many times with web scraping. So I wanted to present it at the beginning just to show that lots of things can go wrong trying to use one of these tools like Dataminr to automatically pick up things. But here, if I press 1 and then I press 2 on the same box, it pops up. And Dataminr detects that there's 20 rows and it will let me go further. So it's hard to say exactly what was going on the first time. You'll see that there's a difference between this box, which includes a little bit more down here at the bottom, and this smaller box, which is the element that Dataminr can grab for us. And that means that it's recognizing some pattern in the backend code that makes this element chunk more conducive to detection than this big one. So for now, let's just chalk it up to one of those things. We could probably find the answer somewhere back in the code itself, but we got what we want. Let's just move on. 20 rows for 20 books, perfect. So now we have 20 rows in our spreadsheet, one for each element, or one for each book in this case. Now we need to start figuring out our columns, get the information from the code to populate our spreadsheet. So we have the rows, perfect. That's usually going to be the easiest part. Getting the columns can be a little more difficult. So let's look at an easy example first. When we open up the columns part of DataMiner, the first thing we need to do is we need to give our column a name. And I'm going to stick to price first. That's going to be these numbers. Because I played around with this, I know price is going to be easy to grab. Let's just get it to show you how price works to select using the Easy Column Finder. So this is a great tool that, just like we did with the rows, we're just going to kind of point and click where we think our information is, or where we see it. Will DataMiner pick it up? So here I'm hovering over the price, and then instead of 1 and 2, you'll see that the instruction is to hit the C button on the keyboard. So I highlight it, and I press C. Great, we found 51.77, which is what we want. And we'll see that DataMiner has picked up the price for every single book. And the way you want to check that is after we select something, we always want to go to this tab, which will give us an overview of what DataMiner is getting. And we see, yes, 51.77, that's our first book. Our second book, Tipping the Velvet, 53.74, 53.74, and so on. So sometimes DataMiner will detect what you want, and it will have it formatted nicely for you. Unfortunately, this is not always the case, as we will see in just one second. Now, before we move on, I'm going to hop back to the code to show you the difference between text and attributes. And we talked a little bit about attributes during the lectures, but it's an important difference because there is information in the code that is not in the front-end website. So it's always a good idea to use the CSS selector first to just explore a little bit the code of each element that you're trying to grab. In this case, we're going to focus on the title because here we see that the title is not complete, right? The book is called A Light in the Attic, and what we are seeing is a light in the ... Now, let's go and view the developer tools and check out the title. So as you'll see from before, I'm just moving down. Again, wherever the blue box is, I'm going to keep opening that up to get to the title. Right. So now I have the kind of header for each element. And here we'll see that difference between, from detecting the rows. Here in the code is the difference between those two boxes. But let's get to our title. There it is. And this is what I want to show you. So if we look just at this white part, It may be different on your browser depending on your settings. You can change the color of the developer tools. Here we'll see a light in the ... That is within the A tag. Remember, A is a hyperlink tag, and there is a hyperlink in this in the title, right? If we click the title, it will bring us to this web page. But we also see that there is the full title, A Light in the Attic. But we don't see that on the front end. But we can see in the code that A Light in the Attic, the full title, is an attribute. Remember, an attribute is something that has something equals and then quotes. And that's different from the element tag. So we actually have two versions of the title in this code, and we would never know that without looking at the code itself. And this is going to be important because we can actually pull both of these pieces of information. We can pull the short title that's here, a light in the ... and we can pull the title as an attribute if we want the full title. And I think if we wanted to build a nice spreadsheet, we would want the full title of each book, but we wouldn't know it's there without looking at the code. So how does that translate into Dataminr? Let me show you. We have our price. Now, just for example's sake, let's start with the short title. We go to the Easy Column Finder. We go to our title. We click C. Wouldn't let me do it before. It always gets a bit tricky when you have the developer tools open and Dataminr and the web page. You might have to close out the developer tools. It can be a bit buggy and frustrating, especially when you first start using it. So here it's found a light in the. Confirm. I can check the data and I'll see that, okay, I've got number 1, a light in the, number 2, tipping the velvet, number 3, Sue mission, number 4, sharp objects. Perfect. These are all the titles. But you'll see that there are a number of titles that are incomplete. But we know they're there in an attribute in the code. So we can grab that by calling this full title. And these names these are just going to be the header of your spreadsheet. This is just whatever you want to call them. So what I can do is I can go to the Easy Column Finder, and instead of asking for text, which was that white part of the in the code, I can click Other Attribute, which is essentially just looking for attributes rather than text. And if we look for other attributes and we go back, we'll see that title has been found. Remember, we had title equals a light in the attic. So title is the attribute. We've got the full title. Click it, confirm, check our data. And now we'll see that we actually have the full titles as well. So that's why it's important to know a little bit about attributes and elements. Basically to see, is the information you want in the text of a tag, in my developer tools, that's going to be the white colored font, versus is it an attribute, which is always going to be in quotes and have the attribute equals next to it. So if you don't find what you're looking for in text, try setting other attribute, and maybe then Dataminr will find it. Okay, I'm just going to move this up so it's out of the way from me. So what else can we get? We can get is if it's in stock or not. I'll call that availability. Easy column finder. In this case, I'm not going to go look in the code. I'm just going to say, okay, is it text? And it works. And just to make sure that I've got 20, all the books are in stock. Great, right? This corresponds to what's on the page. Now, in the last example I'm going to show you here, we're going to try to get the rating of the books. And just from having played around with this, I know that this is going to be hard to get. So let's look at what happens if you're not getting the information that you want. And I just had to restart because it took me a while to figure this out, because it is a little bit complicated and hopefully not something you need to use too much. But what I want to do is kind of open the box and show you how web scraping can be frustrating and require you to do a little bit of trial and error. So I'm going to create a new column here called star rating and try to walk you through some of the difficulties in getting this. Yeah, something is carrying over from last time. I don't know what that is. Anyways, now we'll see that there is the star rating here. And we can try to see where that is in the code. If we go down, 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 we'll see that the star rating is in an attribute called class, which is in a tag called P. And you'll see that when you're going through different parts of the code, the CSS selector will kind of show you where it's pulling that from. So if we look at this image, we'll see that we have div, that's the tag, dot what is in the attribute class, image container. If we go to star rating, we'll see it's P, that's the tag, dot star rating, dot 3. So the selector will always put a dot where there's a space. So P dot star rating dot 3 is the part of the code that corresponds to the highlighted part, which is kind of what we want, right? We want to get these star ratings. If I go to the easy column finder, as we just did, I can press C. Sometimes you need to kind of re-click on the front end. Sometimes the cursor is stuck over in developer tools. So there I'll see that if I click C, it shows up, but nothing is in my box for what it found. And importantly, another signal it didn't work is you don't see the other star ratings being highlighted in this purple box. So this didn't work. I have 0 data. I can also try an attribute like before. It says it found my item, but in fact it did not. So I'm looking at the code here, which is what I'd recommend, and try to figure out, okay, what's going on? That's the first step. So I have this P.starRating.3. If I go to the next item, I'll see I have P.starRating.1. So each of these items shares this attribute called class, but the names of those, the values of those attributes, which is what's in the quotes, is not. And that's why right? The first one says star rating 3, and the second one says star rating 1. So DataMiner can't pick up a constant piece of data across all of the items, and that's why we're not getting the data to work. So now we have to go into more advanced customization. So let's go into advanced settings. And here we'll see that what the column finder found was p.3, and that's just not working. It's not giving us the data that we need. So we'll go to what's called the advanced finder. And here we hover over what we want and press Shift. And this gives us a bit more detail into what we want to select. So let's get the star rating and let's get the 3. And again, this is where you're going to need to try different combinations of CSS classes and element tags, try to figure out what works. And that's the trial and error and the frustrating part. I know that by looking at the code, each book, each element has an attribute called class with a value star rating and then the actual rating, 3, 1, 2, etc. So I want that information. I want the star rating and I want the number. I could probably do without the star rating, but I'm just going to keep them both. And then I'm going to go to confirm, and I still have 0 data. And the reason is that I have to put the attribute name. So I know that my star rating, 3, 1, 2, whatever it is in an attribute. And DataMiner needs to know what is the attribute name. And if I go to it, the attribute name is class. Right? Attributes are always with this equal sign, and the name of the attribute is what's before the equal sign. So when I type in class, DataMiner is picking up 3 in element 1, element 8, and element 16. So if I go to number 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, yes, because it's picking up everything that has the star rating 3. So I don't need the 3. I just need the star rating. And now I have it for each book. And now I know that is confusing. But that's why you need to know a little bit about looking at the back-end code and really try to guess what is the combination of information that I need to put into DataMiner to give me what I want. And this example of the star rating is confusing. And it's because of the way that the site was programmed, right? They could have, whoever made this site could have written the backend in a different way that would make it easier to grab. And it's just an example to show. We'll work through more of these, and hopefully you'll have a better idea of how this works. But even for me, I hadn't seen these star ratings before working with this site. It wasn't very clear to me, like, why isn't it picking up the star rating? Okay, I see there's different ones. What do I need to put into DataMiner so that it will give me what I need? And that takes a lot of trial and error. Using the advanced finder, I knew that what I was looking for was in an attribute. That's the first step, right? It's in quotations under the attribute class. I have to specify the attribute name and pick the right chunk of the code, which in my case was in the information here. P star rating 3 DM call. I mean, it kind of makes sense now that we have the answer that, okay, I need to specify the star rating But specifying star rating .3 is too much because it only gives me those books that have a star rating of 3. So I have to go one back or one up in the code to get just star rating. So sometimes when you're trying to get various pieces of an element, some are going to be super easy, detectable off the bat. Some, like the title, are going to be hidden in the code under an attribute, and you'll have to go look at the code to find that information. And other times, you're going to have to work with the advanced finder, figuring out which attribute is your information in, and playing around with different customizations, using maybe it's star rating 3, maybe it's just star rating. But the important part here was I had to specify the attribute name, which is called class. And constantly going back and checking that the data that you have is there. So part of the reason I chose this Books to Scrape site is because it does have some of these landmines in them that are difficult. But I didn't want to show you on the first tutorial that if you just click the easy column finder, everything will show up. No, there is some customization, and it's usually about changing between text and attributes. And then the really frustrating part is when you know the information you want is in an attribute, how do you tell DataMiner that specific attribute that you need to grab? What is the combination of the name and the actual selector, the piece behind the attribute, in order for DataMiner to give you what you want? That is really the trial and error process. And because each website is coded differently, you're going to have different config. There's no one size fits all. It's really going back and forth with the advanced finder, with the code, putting in different values to try to get exactly what you need. In most cases, you'll be able to get a lot of information very easily and quickly with just the finding tools, the CSS selector, and just switching between text and other attribute. But in some cases, like this example with the star ratings, it can be a little bit more complicated. But we have them now. And what we have looking at this data set is we have a row for each book. So we have 20 rows, and we have the price, the short title, the full title, the availability, and the star rating for all of those books. Everything adds up to 20. That looks good. Now, this navigation, this is going to be for pagination. We want to do this across multiple pages. And we'll do that. I guess we can go ahead and do it now before we scrape. So when we look at the page, or we look at the front end of the page, we'll see that this is page 1 of 50. To go to the next page, you have to click Next. That's what we want to tell DataMiner is the navigation element. So basically, same process as before. We're going to try to find, and you'll see there's different examples of how do we go to the next page. Here, it's clear. It's this button Next. It seems quite easy to find. I press N, and DataMiner found it. And we can test it, which is nice. So if we test, did this work? Yeah. Now we're on page 2, which shows us the next 20 books. And one way we can see that is in the link itself, right? We've gone to page 2, and we'll talk more about this with pagination, but if we type 3, we'll go to page 3. And that's how Web Scraper can automatically go from page to page, because it can really just tell that there's this common structure here. And you'll notice a lot of web pages have this format where to go to certain pages, you can just change in the hyperlink where to go. So we did confirm that the navigation element was detected. JS is for more customization that we don't need for this class. And then we would save our recipe. So I'm going to call it books to scrape list page. And I could write a description if I wanted to, and then I will save it. So that's the hard part in setting up the scraper. It's finding the elements and the information and making sure that you have told Dataminr, or Dataminr has found the specific parts of the code that it needs to harvest the data, to scrape the web page. So the last step is to go to scrape in Dataminr. And this will bring us to a different part of Dataminr where we can see how our spreadsheet is going to look. These are, different scrapers I built just mostly in preparation for this course. But here we'll see the one that we just built, and this is how our spreadsheet is going to look. We've got our price, our short title, our long title, availability, and the star rating we'll see has shown up like this: star rating 3, star rating 1. It's not perfect, but we can replace these in Excel later just to have 3, 1, 1, 4. Whoops. So once I have the recipe up, I can just go to scrape. And that's it. Dataminr has scraped the web page, and I can download it as a CSV in Excel. Let's save it as a CSV. And I will just save it to downloads. And then open it up. And there it is, my 20 books. So I'll just briefly show the pagination part, because we do have the next button, the navigation element, detected. And what we can see here is that we can customize the number of pages we want to scrape, as well as the time delay between pages. Remember, I talked about that in the ethics lecture. We want to leave some time in between scraping each page to put less resources on the server, but also it's a good ethical practice. But again, remember, I don't want to burn through all my 500-page limit. So I'll just do 3 pages for now, and I'll put a delay of 5 seconds. And what Dataminr is going to do is it's going to scrape the first page, it's going to hit next, scrape the second page, go next, scrape the third page, and it's going to wait 5 seconds in between each scrape. So let's, and you'll see it moving. It's waiting. Now it's on to page 3, and it scraped that. And now you'll see that we have, looks like 4 pages. So 80 books divided by 20 is 4. So it went next 3 times. Page 1, next, page 2, next, page 3, next, page 4, next. But it worked. We have a complete spreadsheet here. And we'll do a couple more examples just to kind of troubleshoot when data is hard to grab. But that's the basic process of scraping, both for a list page and for a details page, which we'll do next. The process is the exact same for a details page in terms of getting the information with the finder and maybe looking into the code to figure out the actual attribute we need in certain cases. So I think this is a good introduction to see sometimes how getting information is easy, sometimes it's difficult, but that's basically the process of building a recipe. The scraping itself is just clicking a button. Do you want 1 page? Do you want 100 pages? How much time between each page? And then you download it into a spreadsheet. So the hard part is really creating the recipe. And we will go through a few more examples in the coming tutorials. But for now, let's keep it with this, and we'll move on to doing a details page with the book before we go into some more real-life examples. So hope this was helpful, and don't underestimate when you're using Dataminr for the first time the tutorial videos in Dataminr itself. It's a little bit of I wouldn't say a buggy tool, but sometimes you'll be clicking, C for the columns or 1 and 2 for the rows, and it won't be working. Maybe you need to go back and actually click on the web page because your cursor is stuck in Dataminr or it's stuck in Developer Tools. So it takes a little bit of time just to get a feel for the program, just like with any new program. So don't get too frustrated in the beginning, but if you can't get the information you want, maybe just delete that column and check around some other elements so you get more of a feel of working with the program before you really start trying to troubleshoot one particular piece of information, because definitely you can spend a couple hours just trying to get one piece of information to put into a column. And that's the frustrating part of web scraping. So let's pause for now, and I'll come back and we'll do next the details page for one of the books.